things actually just got better for everyone in the American housing market, or this is a complete nightmare, depending on who you ask. Because you have a lot of realtors right now saying this is a nightmare, and everyone else that's like, this is great. And that's because the National Association of Realtors just agreed to settle several cases for $418 million. And while each lawsuit had its own specifics, the main thing that they all complained about was how the NAR essentially fixed realtor commission prices at 5 to 6%, which most out there felt was just way too high. Also, if any of this sounds familiar, it's because last fall, a federal court handed a landmark $1.5 billion decision down against the NAR as part of these lawsuits. And what's different now is that as part of an agreement to have a smaller settlement, the NAR renounced any right to appeal the decision, with the interim CEO of NAR claiming that the settlement was the best the group could do, saying ultimately continuing to litigate would have hurt members and their small businesses, and adding, while there could be no perfect outcome, this agreement is the best outcome we could achieve in the circumstances. And so assuming that a judge approves a settlement, which is almost not even a hurdle, this is a final thing. And it's widely expected that we will see a major fallout all across the industry, most of which will be good for buyers and sellers, with this really only expected to have a negative impact on realtors, with the easiest difference to spot being home prices, with realtors no longer able to force a 5 to 6% commission on the final sale price. And if you've never purchased or sold, if the buyer also has a realtor, then the two of them usually split it 50-50 between them. And while to some, 6% doesn't maybe sound like a lot, right? 6% of $100, $6. But when you scale those numbers up, you suddenly realize how big those commissions can get. Take, for example, $1 million home. You're talking about $60,000. Also, before some of you hit me with $1 million home is an outrageous example. First off, in some of the most populous places in the country, that's around the norm. But also, fine, let's scale it down to the average home price across America. That's about $417,000. That's a hit of $25,000. And the real kicker is that you needed to agree to this commission rate if you wanted your home listed on NAR's multiple listing service, right? Which is this massive database that has homes for sale all over the country and is the easiest way for realtors to connect buyers and sellers. And I cannot undersell how big of a deal this is. That database and actually, I'm gonna just start calling it NAR. Makes me feel Australian. NAR. Fuck you, I find it funny. That database and NAR's that database and NAR's other connections resulted in 9 out of 10 homes in America being sold by a NAR-affiliated realtor. And that database is actually its own can of worms and the source of another lawsuit NAR is facing. Because let's say you wanted to avoid using a realtor at all and just do it yourself. You'd save a ton of money and you'd only really need to hire an attorney for some of the paperwork. However, you wouldn't be able to list your home on MLS, meaning that it's borderline invisible to realtors all over the country, which in turn makes it that much more difficult to sell your home. NAR essentially made a little ecosystem that sellers and buyers have to agree to in order to really have a chance of finding a home. And MLS is such a problem that it's actually facing other lawsuits over the database. And in general, the entire scheme to fix the price of commissions forced sellers to raise the prices of their homes to compensate, especially as it's not like you had a lot of room to negotiate with them either. The NAR literally fixed the commission price for the 1.5 million realtors it represents, which for context is very high. Up in Canada, for example, the average price is about 4%, about 2% per agent. Although notably, that's also going down as rates get more competitive. And even then, Canadians are complaining that the rates they have are so high. And so the change that we're seeing now, it's believed that it's going to reduce commission prices by 25 to 50%. And in total, it's expected that the $100 billion a year that realtors are paid will shrink by about a third. Or it might even upend how homes are sold altogether. One major thing that the lawsuits push for was a change to who pays for the commission, with them arguing that it should be the buyer who pays, not the seller. Although with this change, it'll likely make it so that some kind of negotiation takes place. And so because of that, there's also a huge opening for other ways of buying and selling homes, such as using flat fees or fee-based. There's also a good chance that this could affect home prices in other ways, like availability, where the stocks of home builders bumped since the announcement, with Leonard jumping 2.4%, Toll Brothers rising 1.8%, and Pulse Group getting about a 1% boost. All of which are signs that investors think that they'll have their work cut out for them. And so as great as all this sounds for the vast majority of people, of course, this is not without some critics. Obviously, realtors are upset that they've lost their racket. And to be fair to them, it's not like most realtors don't do anything. They definitely handle a lot of paperwork, they show the homes, they act as a liaison between a seller and a buyer. But there was definitely a very real question of, do these services add up to the cost? But there was a very real question of, were you overpaying for what was being done? Whether you're talking about the $25,000 on average, and/or is there a meaningful difference when you sell things that are higher, right? Is there a meaningful difference in what a realtor has to do to sell a $417,000 home, a $1 million home, a $5 million home, one of these $10 million McMansion things they throw up out here, which with the way things were would warrant a $600,000 commission, right? And so you have people saying, you could theoretically do all of this yourself and just hire a lawyer to do the paperwork for far, far less. So the drawback there is that you got to do more work yourself. And all of this is some companies are very wary of this news. Like Zillow, for example, which heavily relies on how the industry currently operates, they're dooming about what could happen next. Right? In a 10K filing last month, it warned that, quote, if agent commissions are meaningfully impacted, it could reduce the marketing budgets of real estate partners or reduce the number of real estate partners participating in the industry, which could adversely affect our financial condition and results of operations. And other companies have already seen the effect, with Redfin's stock dropping about 5%. And all of this is there are a few analysts who aren't convinced that this is actually going to have a noticeable effect on home prices, saying, yeah, it'll have the impact effect of reducing commission costs for sellers and possibly to the detriment of buyers, but sellers don't set home prices based on what their closing costs will be. The market sets home prices. You also have companies like LendingTree warning that people should have muted expectations from the decision, saying, yes, it is a major change to the industry, but it's not like the effects are going to be noticed overnight. Not to mention that there are bigger issues when it comes to buying a home, such as interest rates, which, I mean, just in the last few years, there's such a difference that a $25,000 commission or however much it is might be relatively small in comparison to the other money impacts. But with all that, no matter who you are, whether you're someone that's bought, you've sold, you're a realtor yourself, you're someone that just goes on Zillow and goes, that would be nice. What are your thoughts on the news that we're seeing and why?